Welcome, everybody. I hope everybody is doing well. Can I just get a quick mic check to make sure that y'all can hear me? If someone can say yes or come
Yep,
off
we can hear
perfect.
you.
Wonderful. Well, I am so thankful. I'm hopefully we'll have a few more people join in, but I am so happy that you guys have joined us for everyone here is special because this is the first meeting of our evidence-based practice nursing journal club at Overton Brooks VA Medical Center. So we're so excited and everyone can say they were the first. So what we're going to do is we'll go ahead and get going, and just for ease of for the presentation, I'm going to probably turn my camera off and then just present. And Alia, if you see anything in the chat that you think I need to know about, if you will kind of moderate the chat for me, that would be wonderful. And then we'll get going. So let me turn my camera off and then I'm going to put my presentation on. Okay, dokie. So you should be able to see my screen. So like I said, this is our first meeting. We're so excited to have it and welcome. If you don't know who I am Bethany Shirley. So I am actually one of the staff development instructors here at Overton Brooks, and I am a registered nurse and nurse practitioner. So I do have a clinical background, and I really enjoy learning about and implementing best clinical practices. So when Miss Allie Pollard asked me if I would be interested in serving as a member of our local evidence-based practice quality improvement and research council, I was very happy. I enjoy it. I enjoy learning. And so I was excited to do it. So and we have some members on, so I thank you that are on. So, but during these meetings and these discussions, we kind of really realized that we probably needed to re-educate our nurses at Overton Brooks related to actually implementing evidence-based practice. And so what we found in trying to decide what the best way to re-educate was that one of the methods that we can use is journal clubs. So there really is a large body of evidence that supports journal clubs to help improve the utilization of evidence-based practice. So that's why we formed this journal club. Our purpose really is to increase overall knowledge and understanding of evidence-based practice. So that's where we're going to start, and that's our purpose and our goals. And I just want everyone to know that this is meant to be interactive. So it is virtual, so sometimes there's a little bit of disconnect, but you guys can stop me at any point if you have a thought. It really is just a meeting of the minds so that we can kind of get some things in practice, and I want you guys to come off mute and speak and share your thoughts. So a few things as we move, let's see if I can advance my slides. There we go. We do have some objectives. And so here they are. So at the end of each session, your goal is that you're going to be able to define evidence-based practice. You'll be able to explain the steps of evidence-based practice, and you'll understand that there really are some synergies between quality improvement, EBP, and research. And then you're going to be able to look at research and appraise it, and then we'll decide whether or not some changes are needed for our facility and some of our current processes and protocols. So these are the objectives. Know that there are no conflicts of interest among the faculty and planning committee members for this continuing education, so we do not have anything that we need to disclose. This journal club has been approved for one continuing education hour from ANCC, and so every session that you attend, you will be awarded an hour. Once I document your attendance, your accreditation certificate will be ready to be printed 48 hours after the meeting. So let's get going. So typically, our goal is going to be when we meet with the journal club, we're probably going to be looking at specific and focused interventions and maybe whether or not we need to change our practices. But with this being our first meeting and our inaugural meeting, I really wanted to start like really at step 0 and at the very beginning. So we're going to be a little more broad today, and we're going to discuss really what is evidence-based practice, what is the concept of it, and what does it mean. But know that in the future, we really are going to get into the nitty-gritty and we're going to be looking at interventions. But today is just more of an overview. So let's start with what is evidence-based practice? I know we hear it, I know we throw that term out there, but in order to really implement it, we have to know what in the world does it mean. So I've got two definitions here. The first one is from the VHA Office of Nursing, and so what they define it, evidence-based practice, is the integration of the best available evidence, clinical expertise, and patient preferences at the point of practice. So it's kind of these three things all in that all come together, and then that's where you actually implement things in practice. There's also the American Nursing Association. They say it's the who, what, where, when, why, and how of nursing. So those are kind of the definitions. So it's really when we take what we know to be best and then we implement it. But we also remember there's three things. We can't just only do what we think is best and use our clinical expertise. We really do have to consider patient values and preferences. And then all of those things come together. And that's where we get evidence-based practice. So that's a working definition of what it is. So there's a couple of things I want you to think about, some main points to remember about evidence-based practice. So it truly is a multi-step method, and so we get those best available evidence, and then we translate that evidence into interventions. So we don't just talk about what's best, we don't just have the research and the evidence, we actually put it into practice. So that's part of the process. And so we also use current research findings, and that's what we say, this is what we need to do. We move away from what is the best, or excuse me, what was acceptable, what we've always done, but we really move away from, and this is how we always do it, to this is what's best. And so we also need to remember that it's a multidisciplinary team. We can't, nurses are not, even though this is a nursing journal club, that we have to involve multiple disciplines in order to actually be effective and to perform these interventions. And so it is a process, like I said. And so because of that, with it being a process, there's different models. And so I'm going to show you some models. So a lot of us are more familiar with the 7-step process models, and that's really the one that we're going to be looking at today. But there are multiple models, and these are actually models that are all recognized by the Office of Nursing Services. So there's not one that we have to use. We can choose and decide if we want to actually implement some things and go through the process. We can choose whatever model that we feel works best for us, but they all are good models. But it's really important to just remember that whatever model you use, it's good to use a planning tool and to keep us on track so we know at what step in the process that we're actually at. And the Office of Nursing Service actually provides a worksheet, and they have several different things that we can utilize when we're actually working through this process. So, but there are several models, and the one today, we're going to look at the 7-step process. And if you see, and we'll talk about this later, but step 0 is cultivate a spirit of inquiry. And that's the article that we're going to be looking at today. So we're really going to hang out at what is considered step 0. So that's where we'll be at. And so as part of that process, we have to actually be able to appraise evidence. So in order to implement it, we have to take research and we have to actually be able to comprehend it, and we have to be able to interpret it. So that is considered step 3. So one thing that I want us to remember, like I said, we really are going to be looking at articles that will guide practice and interventions, but we can't just, and I know everyone on here is smart and knows we can't just take an article that we find online. We have to remember that all evidence is not created equally, and we have to make sure that it's actually valid and reliable, and we really have to appraise that evidence. And the way that we can determine if it's good evidence is that we have to understand that there is truly a hierarchy of evidence. And so when we look at articles, we need to see, are these really considered high-level evidence, or is it not really necessarily the highest level? And if so, we may have to do a little bit more digging. So right here is a pyramid, and it kind of explains these are the different types of evidence. So as you see, there's at the bottom, you may be able to find more studies, because there may be more of these types out there, but they may not be as good of evidence. But this does show you some, if you're looking for background information, it tells you some of the places where you could get this. So, but it's just important for us to understand that not all evidence is the same, and that some of it really holds a higher value and a higher weight. And so this is why we don't necessarily we don't use social media or Wikipedia to determine what's best for our patients, because goodness, we'd all be doing some crazy stuff if we based our practices on what we find on the internet. So this is one of the first things that we always, those of us that have been in taught nursing school before, we always have to make sure our students understand that no, Wikipedia is not a good source. We have to go dig a little deeper and let's get some real research studies. So there is the hierarchy of evidence. And if, just in case, not that anyone may want this, but if anyone ever does want this, I can provide the slides if anyone is interested in any of this. So continuing with critical appraisal, again, we just have to understand it's the process where we really examine and look to judge whether it's true, whether it's got value and it's relevant. And then we have to truly understand the concepts of reliability and validity. So we have to understand that we want our research to be reliable, meaning that if we did this again, we would get the same results. So if you have a study that you can only generate the results one time, well, then it's not reliable, and we sure wouldn't want to base our practices on something that's not reliable. And the same goes for validity. We want to make sure that it's true and that it actually reflects the concept that it's intended to measure. So if we don't have something that's reliable and valid, then we really don't want to use it to guide our practice, because that wouldn't be fair to our patients, because then they would not be getting the best care. And so we also have to understand when we're looking and doing critical appraisal, we want to look for bias. We want to look for if it's mostly opinions or assumptions, and we want to definitely steer away from something that we thought had bias. And I do want to say, if you are interested, Alia Pollard had shared that there is a free online course. I think it's through Ohio State University, and it's very good. And if you're interested in digging a little deeper, we can share that link. And I've done the first couple of modules and I've just learned a lot. So if anyone wants that link, I'm happy to share. We highly recommend it. So, and just kind of finishing up our overview, and then I promise we'll get to our article, is I want everyone to understand that there are some synergies between research, evidence-based practice, and quality improvement. So they all work together. So research is where we go to know what is the best thing to do. And then evidence-based practice is where we really focus on implementing that. So we don't just know about it, we actually put it into practice. And we usually focus on a narrow population. So we're looking at a specific group that we're implementing. And then, excuse me, quality improvement is where we look, it's more of an internal thing. We're looking at ourselves. Like for us, we would be looking at our own institution. We may even zero it down to what is the ICU doing, or what is 6 West doing, or what are our CBOCs, or what is wound care doing. We zero it in and we say, are we doing the best thing correctly every time? So that's how we gauge whether or not we're actually doing the right thing in our institutions. And then if we find out that we're not, that's when we can look back and we can make changes, because our goal, of course, is to do the best thing always so that we can have better patient outcomes. So know that they're all linked. You're not going to have good quality care if we're not staying up to date on the research and we're not actually implementing these best practices. Okay, so now we're going to get to the article. If you didn't have a chance to read it, that's okay. But we're going to get to it. So as I said, this is one of the 7-step processes. This is one of the models for evidence-based practice. And step 0 is cultivate a spirit of inquiry. And so that's what we're going to look at. So let's see, how do we cultivate a spirit of inquiry? Because it's super important, because it really is essential for a foundation for evidence-based practice. If we don't have if we're not curious, if we don't want to know why or how can we improve things, then we're not going to be interested in implementing evidence-based practice. So this is why this article is a good one to start with. I do want to say, I know this is an older article, and typically when we are looking at best practices and research that's out there, excuse me for one second, y'all. Sorry, allergy drainage is getting me. But typically, when we're looking at best practices, we probably wouldn't want an article that dates back to 2009. But this is really a historical article in the sense of it's not changed. It's written by one of the experts in this field, and it really is still very valid. It's as valid today in 2023 as it was in 2009. So if you haven't had a chance to read it, this is the article. I put it in the chat, and I encourage you to read it. And so our title is Evidence-Based Practice, Step-by-Step Igniting a Spirit of Inquiry. And then your authors are listed. And several of these authors are who, if you are interested in doing the online course, they will be leading that. So, and that's just where it came from. And just if you're interested, this is the first article in a series that that the authors did, and so they go through each step. So it's actually a very good series, and so this was the very first one, and so I felt like it really was good to start with step 0 and kind of get us started. Okay, so this is where I'm going to want some people to chime in and talk to me. So first off, just a quick synopsis of the article is it really helps nurses build the knowledge and skills they need to implement evidence-based practice in their institutions. So, but the article really causes us to stop and look at the current situation. So, and if we're really being honest, the current situation is many nurses engage in practices that truly aren't supported by evidence. So, and just looking and glancing at people who are on, we have a lot of experience. So, and I can say, so 18 years as a nurse, probably, I mean, there's people on here that have 30 years of nursing experience, but we could probably all attest to that there are things that we do that probably we aren't really supported by evidence. So I'm going to give y'all some examples, and then I'm going to ask y'all if y'all can think of others. So I can think of this. I know at the last hospital I worked at, we were still using normal saline when we were sectioning endotracheal tubes, even though that's not recommended. What about this one? And this one was interesting to me when I went back after probably 10 years as a nurse, went back to teaching, that we're not supposed to be given IM injections in the dorsogluteal site, but I promise you, every day, I guarantee that we're still doing that. We're still giving IM injections in that location. There's other things that stopping enteral feeds based on a one-time elevated gastric residual volume, placing patients in full Trendelenburg for hypotensive episodes, even though there's really no evidence that really helps. So those are all things that we keep doing. So can they think of anything? I mean, and this is like, don't be afraid. It's not like I'm going to go say that, we're not going to share this to the outside, but can anybody think of anything that maybe we still do that's not supported by best practice, or excuse me, by research? Thoughts? And just think about it. And so we may not want to share them right now, but just think about it. So it's just, this article kind of brings that to light. So there's probably some stuff that we're doing that we probably need to look at. So let's look at spirit of inquiry. So what does that even mean? So what we want to do is we want to make sure that we have this ongoing curiosity about the best evidence to guide clinical decision making. So we need to ask questions to make sure that this really is the best way to do things. But we have to have a culture that supports the spirit of inquiry and that we allow questions to be asked. Because if we have a culture where we don't allow that, where we fuss at people or we get irritated when people ask questions, well, that's not going to cultivate a spirit of inquiry. And then that's probably not going to lead us to actually implementing evidence-based practice. So think about in your mind, let's reflect. Do we have this? Do we actually encourage people to ask questions? Or do we still just individually, do we still ask questions? Or do we just kind of we don't care? Do we still read articles? Do we get irritated when we have to get in serviced on new practices or policies? Like, are we frustrated by that? And so maybe we need to just, in our own minds, reset and we redetermine to have a spirit of inquiry. So, but this is really what we want. We've got to be curious. And we need to encourage questions like this. So if you want to say, who can help me? Who can add to my knowledge? We want to know which of my practices are currently evidence-based and which don't have any evidence to support them. So, and we want to know, where can I find the best evidence? So a lot of people don't realize we are so blessed. We have access through the library. We have so much access here because we are federal employees, but a lot of people probably don't even realize that we have free access to UpToDate, to CINAHL, to Medline. Like, we have so many resources. So we need to question, where can I find these? Elsevier, we have full access to Elsevier and clinical skills. So, but we need to be asking these questions. And this is how we can actually spark that spirit of inquiry. And then these are just some strategies. If you are in a supervisory role, or maybe you're working on a performance project, you can it's just simple things. You can just put why on a poster, and you guys can come up with questions, and then you can look at them and you can review them. So that's just something that you could do. If you have participated in the team training where you have to do a unit-based project, you might want to sit down and just ask some questions and then kind of decide at which question you want to pursue. And then that would lead further on into that evidence-based process and that PICO question. But that's just some ways and some things that we can do. And so I want to hear, this is what I felt was the significance of the article. Does anybody have anything that they think why this article was significant for us and for our facility? Any thoughts?
I think it's for me, I thought it was significant because it talked about how important it was too for leadership to be involved and to also have, with that spirit of inquiry, um, just making it to where it's okay, for nurses to ask questions, and that there's some follow through with it, with those questions, because or whomever, to ask questions, because there's more job satisfaction when I can ask a question and be involved, and that spirit of inquiry is allowed, and that we do something about it. We just don't say, well, I see what you're saying, and that makes sense, that we're able to have someone to turn it over to if we're not savvy with how to look up those things. But like how you said, putting that why poster up and just having them to say whatever they're thinking, and that we go a little further with it. So I thought it was good for that.
I got a lot to say about this.
Oh, come on. Let's hear it, Dr. Nicoletti.
I think that a lot of newer nurses don't know how to fully interpret an article when we share it. And so I think as leaders and educators, we have to break down the evidence and keep it very succinct and simple and get to the meat of it if we're going to share it as a best practice. And then garner the input from our staff on how best we could implement it into a specific area based on their real-time actions they're doing right then in that unit, and meet them where they are to implement it in a better way. It's not going to be cookie cutter. I think that we soon forget that we take this best practice and then we want to implement it, and it's just, here's the blueprint, everybody does it the same way, here you go. And I think we would get more buy-in if we took it from a more specific, a unit specific approach. So those are a couple of things I think about it. I do think that there isn't the opportunity. I think there's more, how can I put this delicately? I think some of our nurses feel almost shamed or hesitant to speak up and say, I don't know, what is the best practice? Or even the baby nurses, I call them baby nurses because I've been doing this for 35 plus years. I think that they're afraid to speak up. I think they're afraid to say anything. And I think some of the older nurses that mentor and precept are living in those past practices, exactly what you said, Bethany. Those past practices, even myself, so many things I learned in the unit or in the ED as a best practice, we don't do now. So, I think they forget that. And it's important that we bring in not only the baby nurses, but the older nurses too, when we want to spark that, that interest, that inquiry, and make it, find another way to approach it. So, those are just perspectives I have, but I really think that there's a better way for us to open that door. So everyone feels it's okay to ask and want to move forward. Maybe we get a suggestion box, don't know, brainstorm and think of really creative ways how we can implement best practices and that spirit of inquiry from all the frontline staff. So that's my soapbox. Sorry, it took too long.
No, no, that's perfect. And it is so key that the culture of our hospital embraces questions, because so often we see excited, new hires, excited, just got out of school, and questions, and then almost like, and I hate to use the term, that nurses that we eat are young, but we don't want to quench that spirit of wanting to ask questions, and we don't want to quench that. So I saw your hand, Alia. What you got? Did you put it down?
No, I didn't. Thank you for recognizing my hand. I just imagine what sparks to me is that we can say that we have a spirit of inquiry, but really my takeaway from this, and I thought to myself, and I don't know if you're even going to get to this or we can get to this, what will that spirit look like across the board? Like to me, it has to be scripted and really intentional is what I'm saying. If we're going to say that we have a spirit of inquiry, how do we frame that? What does that look like? What will that look like in this institution? For example, if we're going to stress that high quality care, in order for it to be delivered, begins with evidence-based, and we know that's what we strive for, that is safe, high quality care, then how about, it be required as far as like a learning module or something to say, this is what we're about. Do you have to be on the EBP council to hear this lingo? Like, if we're going to have a spirit of inquiry to say this is who we are, then that culture needs to be threaded even from the very, very, very beginning. So that's my number one, to think about how do we define it, explicitly define it, what a spirit of inquiry here looks like, and not just saying, oh, we just need to be welcoming to questions, which that's a good thing. But us to really decide, what will that look like? How will we be noted to say, yes, we do this, we check these boxes. And then the other thing, very, very, very critical, I think, and important, is allowing for time, because I realize, whereas we all may have an interest just by us being here and wanting to know more information or just be refreshed or learn from the very beginning, everyone is doesn't have that little research bug, okay? And so even with that, this goes to my second point of us having actual mentors who are very experienced and savvy in when those why questions are asked, that we have something to do with it. Like you can put it on the board, but we're going to, for us to be able to say, we're going to pass this along to our mentors to let them do the inquiry on it and just get back with us with information or what have you. So I think just really having a true framework or a defined way of how we would carry this out from start to finish. So that's all I have.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, yeah. It's not just spoken words, but yeah, action. We do have to follow it up with action. I totally agree. And did I see Tina? Yeah, go ahead, Tina.
I think we've lost the excitement of this also, for a better word. In the day, it was really exciting. Everybody was on board and looking forward to engaging and getting the knowledge for the evidence-based practice. And now I don't know if it's because of the pandemic, staffing, whatever reason, it doesn't carry the excitement that it used to. It's just kind of like there. It is what it is. But I loved your ideas about having this as a required module, allotting the time for that, and possibly having a mentor work with the nurses to get back into this and create that energy and that excitement again.
Yeah, you're right. I think we're so and I'm blessed. And I know it. I'm not in direct patient care, so I have a little bit. And those of us who aren't, we know we're blessed. But when we were, we know how overwhelming it is, and it's even more so than ever. So sometimes we're just trying to make it through our shift. And so when someone brings something up like research and evidence-based practice, it's not that you don't, it's not that you're opposed to it, but sometimes you're just like, you almost just feel like you don't have time for it. But we do ultimately have to remember the importance of it, because if you look on this slide, it really does all point to high quality patient outcomes. And I do think we all want our patients to be taken care of, and we want them to have the best outcomes, truly. And let me see if I will advance my last slide. I think there's one more slide. And so I think we kind of just said a lot of this. So and we can reflect it. If you want to speak out loud, you can. Do you think our facility culture actually embraces the spirit of inquiry? I mean, do we actually, are we open to it? And then do we actually do something about it when we ask questions? And if not, what can we implement to increase our spirit of inquiry? And I think that was kind of what Alia was speaking to, is we probably really do need to have a framework and a model of how we actually implement these things. So, but just think to yourself, and I think we could always do better, to ask questions and to be more curious and to not just do things the way we always have. And I mean, if I heard it once, I heard it 1,000 times when I was teaching students, that people would tell them, it's just the way we do it, or let me tell you the real way. And so, but we want to do things the right way. So not just because it's easier. And I understand there is some bedside wisdom and things we learn, but we do want to always do things the best way, and that we can offer the best outcomes to our patients. So anybody have any additional thoughts? Um, and feel free if you have anything else you want to add. So I hope that you guys enjoyed it. Yeah, and I will make sure that everyone gets credit in TMS, and I'll do that once I get off here. And then again, we are going to be meeting every other month. And so July 12th will be our next meeting, and be looking. I'll send out emails, and then you can register in TMS and you can add it to your Outlook calendar. But if you forget to register, you can always hop on when I send out the email. So July 12th, 12 p.m. to 1 p.m. And then again, our goal and purpose of this journal club is we don't want to do things because we've always done it that way. We want to do things because it's the best practice, and evidence points to us changing our intervention. So any final thoughts or things?
I do have a final thought, and this just really, I hope from this meeting too that, those questions, those reflection questions aren't just rhetorical, because I guess the chat will always be open for us to think about those ideas that we think that would help foster a spirit of inquiry, because we do have mentors in as a part of one of our subcommittees in the journal club, and not journal club, I'm sorry, our EVP council. And what I just thought about, a great way to utilize them is to have them perhaps go to some of the meetings when they have the meetings on the floor, and when they have those why questions, for them to be right there to represent our council on the floor, to again cultivate that spirit of inquiry, to say, when they're having their huddle meetings, or when maybe the managers are having their staff meetings, and a portion of that meeting be dedicated to, what questions do you have? What are you thinking about in practice? What have you done or thought about? Why do we do it this way? Or what can we do to improve our practice? So hopefully we can get that going.
That sounds like a great idea, and that we could definitely get that done. So, well, I thank you everyone for coming, and I hope you enjoyed it. And we look forward to meeting in the future. And if you have recommendations or something you want those of us who actually serve on the planning committee for the journal club, if you have recommendations, send them our way and we'll start looking. We are happy to engage. So thank you guys so much. And do not hesitate to reach out to me. Alia is actually the chair of the council, so she is right there, and she's willing to answer questions also. So, but you guys have a great day, and thank you again.
Thank you all for joining us.